of justice. One, the issue in the court was about the authentication of marriage.
Yeah.
Whether I said there was an ordinance marriage, and if there was an ordinance marriage, then anybody cannot go and marry outside of the ordinance marriage. Then it becomes bigamy in the law.
Mm-hmm.
You can say tradition, but once there's an ordinance marriage, the traditional marriage is not recognized in law.
Yeah.
And the issue in the court was to authenticate whether say Akusha Sewa was legally married. Now they brought marriage certificates from the German consulate. It was translated into English. It was sent to the School of Languages in Ghana, which is an expert field, to translate the document from German to English. Now, for the judge to say, sir, the document is not valid. The judge is not an expert on the documentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For her to validate the authenticity of the documentation, an expert in the field had to be brought. The judge cannot make that decision. This is travesty of justice. It looks as if said the judge was already influenced. She was already predetermined to make a judgment on the case because the only person who be defending traditional marriage, it was just hearsay. There was no documentation to back it. How do you use hearsay as evidence in the law of court? Anybody can say anything. Where is the proof? Where is the authentication? It is for you to say that both of them are couples, that is travesty of justice. You cannot trump ordinance marriage with a traditional marriage. If you want to validate the documentation, and according to lawyer Kusino, they had gone to the notaries to certify the certificate. It was translated in Ghana. It came from the German consulate. So what right, based on what authority does the judge have? Because she's not an expert on documentation. She's not an expert on documentation. She only has to listen to arguments, look at precedents. If there is any previous judgment from a higher court that validates that judgment, she didn't look at all those things. She just based it on her own assumptions. And if they appeal in a higher court, because Ghana legal system, we practice common law system, just like the United Kingdom, and it is based on precedents. Decisions that are made from the higher court are binding on lower courts. And that decision now we're making, fine. If they appeal in the higher court to prove that the documentation were valid, the case will be recalled because her judgment is from a lower court, and the higher court can repeal the judgment she made.
About law, and I mean, now, appeal. Would they be allowed to say they can tender in a new evidence video?
Under special circumstances, if the legal team can convince the panel, say a new evidence is come up and it is conventional, it will be accepted. It is not the norm, but under special circumstances, you can provide new evidence to the appellate court, which is done. Okay. If the legal team finds new evidence to buttress their case, at the time of hearing, those documents were not available, and now they have them, and the panel is convinced that they can tender in those documents.
Yeah, but because my many judgment, what true say there were no videos, but my say say I feel videos now, but I don't know if they call.
Where were videos of the traditional marriage? Where were the videos of the traditional marriage?
There were not.
Where were
none?
So how it was somebody's word say only pakono krano or wari will fear. Or some hearsay, no documentation to prove it. How is hearsay admissible in the law of court? Anybody can say anything in court. So how can just hearsay become admissible in the court? The judge already had her position. It is not based on legal facts, because what precedent is she using? Because the common law system is built on precedent. judgments that are made by previous judges in higher court, because decisions in lower courts are not binding on higher courts. However, decisions in higher courts are binding on lower courts, and the lower court must follow precedents that have taken place before. So you look at previous legal cases and the decisions that were made and the reasons that were given in the judgment to inform you as to how you make a decision in the current case. What are the legal precedents that were followed? This is miscarriage of justice. And I think that the legal team should appeal and submit all those documents which they already tendered, and the judge was saying, sir, it is not enough. Under what circumstances is he in the position to determine which document is authentic? When the letter was coming from the German consulate, whoever wrote that letter had their name on it. If you wanted to verify, German consulate is not in Mass, it's in Accra. You could verify, you could subpoena them to come to court and then defend the document. Even Ghana marriage certificate.
Subpoena no, enye judge no, na lawyer no na, eno na yo me bibi kakra.
The defense, Odobroni legal team who has to do that to validate, say, if you disagree with data, the burden of proof lies on you. So you have to prove, say, and you're authentic.
Oh, okay. And
Akusha one lawyer doesn't have to prove that. She has submitted a document.
Now, problem. So let's allow say almost say yeah.
I'm gonna make actually say the judge or not the judgment, or a preconceived judgment, because some of the document a backward. Now let me say document in a authentic. Unji there, una will say a problem with the document. So now you have to make me look bad by proving some document in the end correct. It is not the burden of proof is not on me. The burden of proof is on you, because see document in a genuine. Then you have to prove it. Let me see document in a genuine. So you have to prove to the court, say, document a fake. The burden of proof is on you, it's not on me.
Because I throw with on the expert, and what did the maintenance judge?
On the expert, because why who expert? You bring the expert to the court and we cross-examine the expert.
Exactly.
Who to make judges on the expert? Who was the expert? Where is he? What did the expert say? Expert is a German marriage certificate, was not authentic. The letter no much to say Akusha Sewani Lumba Ewari. There was a marriage certificate number on it, which is verifiable. It was wrong. You can now say based on your findings, the documentation does not exist. You didn't do all that. How can you say only expert in your frame or a German Bruniana or a wine? What is the base? Which database did you use? And where for a layman, you can tell something is fishy somewhere.
Okay.
Because if you are following the legal system there, this judge has no expertise in determining authentic documents. She's not an expert in that. She's not an expert in that. That is where there is still room for them. There's still room for them to appeal the case, because this is a lower court. Their decisions are not binding on any higher court. They should take it harder. If you come to the appellate court, not they can go to the Supreme Court. You go to the highest court, and they should think about the consequences. The more it drags, as long as Chico court, it's delaying everything. And whatever they want to achieve, it will take a long legal battle. But the judge, if they find out, says Ghana now, in a serious country, if they find out that the judge made these decisions on a falsified grounds, she can even be disbarred. Because a travesty of justice, you are just taking the law into your own hands, and you lose your judiciary immunity, and something can happen to you. But we take everything for granted, and then we trample on the justice system. They have to appeal, because she's not in the position to decide which document is not authentic. She's not an expert. She's not an expert.